Roy Moore is now leading in the polls again in Alabama. He could win that race. Mitch McConnell has said he would not be welcome in the United States Senate. Do you think he should be thrown out if he is?
Of course not, and I think we've got to respect the will of the voters.
All right, that is a sort of a turn in opinion among some Republicans, not all, that Roy Moore, who is in the battle of his life to keep that Senate seat in Alabama, Republican, he's even in some polls ahead right now, but already Mitch McConnell's made it clear he'd be persona non grata even if Alabamans did elect him, and that he would try to kick him out. That was not a view shared by Ted Cruz and other conservatives who say, look, if that's what Alabama wants, and he is who Alabama wants, that's who Alabama should get and should be duly seated as United States Senator. We're getting ahead of ourselves. That December 12th election is still some time off. Let's get to Democratic strategist Jessica Tarlov. We've got Spieckerman Media CEO Lee Spieckerman. Jessica, to you on that notion that respect the will of the people. If that's what Alabama voters want or who they want, seat him.
It's complicated, and I do really sympathize with people on both sides here. The New Washington Post poll that came out this morning that has Doug Jones up 3 points found that 74% of Republican voters want other Republican politicians, his opponent, the Democrat, to stay out of it. Exactly what Ted Cruz said. We have elections for a reason. We are well aware of the allegations against him. Let us go to the polls and do it. And if he wins, seat him, let him vote for these tax cuts and other parts of the Republican agenda that they support. I think they're thinking about judges most of all. But we do have this rule that the Senate can expel someone for a reason as well. And I do understand
but usually reasons that don't go back decades, right? So it's a slippery slope.
It is a slippery slope, but with anything, it becomes a slippery slope. We hear this from whatever side is going to be disadvantaged, right? If we do this, down the slope. If we do that, down the slope.
No, you're right about that.
But I can't see him being that productive a member. I don't think he's going to have good relationships with people in the Senate.
Well, that has not stopped other representatives.
Well, it's true. I would want friends.
All right. Well, there is that. But, you know, Lee, another thing comes up. This all happens the same week that Al Franken came back and spoke on the floor of the Senate last night to protest these tax cuts. So he's trying to rebuild himself there, and so far so good on that front. John Conyers maybe not so much, and the House talk that he eventually is going to be forced out or forced to at least resign. He's saying no to that. But you get the gist here, that there are a lot of controversies, a lot of scandals. A couple of other congressmen who sent either lewd photographs of themselves who've opted not to run for re-election. But it just seems like a mess. What do you do?
Well, it is a mess. I'm not one of those that thinks you should get in the but what about category. You know, what about the other guy? This is reprehensible behavior. It should be noted that Franken and obviously the congressmen were in office and are serving now, so they are subject to the ethics inquiry. Ethics inquiries are not designed for behavior that occurred before one was elected. You know, I wanted Roy Moore to exit the race, no question about it. But now that he's in, the will of the voters of Alabama should be honored. I agree with Ted Cruz, and I agree with Jessica on that. You know, we have a lot to worry about in this country. We've got to get the tax bill improved and passed. We've got to deal with trade. We've got to deal with North Korea, ISIS. You know, we have a lot on our hands, and the last thing we need to be worrying about is trying to stifle the will of voters in a legitimate election. I mean, there are a lot of unbecoming people that have been elected to the U.S. Senate, believe me. And, you know, we had Ted Kennedy in 1969, left his young lady to suffocate in his submerged car. There wasn't even talk about expelling him. That was while he was in office.
No, it's a different time. You're right about that. But what I do want to try to get a headline is corporate America.
Look at Menendez's behavior.
I understand, but I'm not going to go afield here. One of the things I do question, though, Jessica, is corporate America is pretty, you know, blunt with this stuff. It found out, you're out.
Right.
We found out with Matt Lauer. And now, of course, in Congress, it takes a while to go through these sort of things. Is there a happy medium? Or is there, or should there be?
I hope so. I think what's going on in Congress is appalling. If you listen to the interviews that Jackie Spear and Barbara Comstock and Kathleen Rice have been giving and what they've exposed about how the system actually works on Capitol Hill.
And no one seemed to know about it.
No. I mean, I think that people
Who's
like
writing the checks?
John Conyers knew about it. Blake Farenthold, the Republican from Texas. That's an $84,000 settlement that's not getting much buzz as we talk about what all the Democrats have done wrong.
Who writes the check?
Well, we write the check.
I know
I guess.
but
it was
they
a trick
all
question.
claim ignorance.
No, they absolutely do. And John Conyers actually went one step further to appropriate his office funds to pay off a sexual harassment suit, which is a huge problem. Congress needs to get their house in order. This is fundamentally why Americans hate Washington. That they're taking our taxpayer money.
Both sides are feeding the beast.
Absolutely, and this is what Donald Trump tapped into, right? This is a swamp issue, and it does add also to the argument that corporate America, the private sector, runs better than the public sector, which I think is more damaging for Democrats, since we are fans of bigger government per se. But we need to get this straight, and we need to know exactly who is.
But we don't. And Lee, that's what I want to end on with you. I mean, you're a free marketeer, capitalist, and all. Do you think that the private sector goes too far? If allegations come out, the person being alleged is out?
Well, I don't subscribe to the believe the accuser. I subscribe to the take the accuser seriously school, because you should always have due process. The problem is, Neil, we had two issues leading up to this plethora of sexual misconduct allegations. Number one, a lot of women obviously simply wouldn't come forward. They were too fearful. They thought it would wreck their careers. Number two, they weren't taken seriously, even the ones that did come forward. And we saw that with the NBC situation. I do think Jessica makes a great point. The private sector, imperfect as it is, as we've seen with the Matt Lauer situation at NBC, overall is doing a heck of a lot better job. And it's pathetic that our elected representatives are hiding and engaging in this kind of behavior, and then the accountability and the transparency is even less than it is with major corporations. I mean, that's really inexcusable.
Guys, a great job on both parts, and I appreciate it, and juggling with all this breaking news.